Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Bear and Brutal podcast. I'm Michelle, your host, and today we are diving into the world of entrepreneurship and unlocking your true potential. We will explore ways to discover who you are and find a path that just aligns with that identity. We'll touch on topics like the power of trauma and shaping your decisions, and insights into effective personal branding. We are joined with David Allen Tracy, who comes with a wealth of wisdom. He is a serial entrepreneur who is a living example of what it means to be successfully leaning into multiple interests and just turning your passions into purpose. So, thanks for joining us, David.
Yes, my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. I was so happy when you reached out to me. I'll be honest. I was like, why the heck are you messaging me? Because David has quite the following. He's super established, and I was like, I don't know why you're talking to me. But just based off the first meeting we had, we clicked so well. And even in our meeting, I was like, I need to just start hitting record because this is quality conversation we're having right now. But yeah, I'm so glad you're on the show, and I'm so glad we got to connect.
Absolutely. No, I'm so glad too. And I was really drawn to your podcast, especially just by the title in and of itself, being bare and brutal. As a personal brand coach, that's really a lot about what I do. I want people to be their real selves, to be bare and to be brutal, brutally honest, brutally authentic, and brutally themselves. And so the title resonated with me. And then I got to see you, and I was like, you know what? She's got this. She's got it. She's got that it factor. And then we met, and of course, we just kind of clicked, like you said, and everything just flowed. And so it was meant to be.
Well, thank you so much for you're the guest, but you're over here complimenting me on my work. That's so great. I definitely struggle with just stepping into my confidence as a creator. Um, I shouldn't be questioning people wanting to reach out to me. I should be like, of course, I want to be a guest on Bare and Brutal. But yeah, no, I love everything that you do. And that's actually a great segue into one of our first questions. Would you care to just walk the audience through who you are, your journey? You wear many different hats. So I guess just start off outlining who you are, describing all the things that you do in your background.
Absolutely. Yeah. And before I do that, I also just want to affirm the fact that for those listening, I'm very impressed with how organized you are, for example, in how in this whole podcast process. I mean, you had the beautiful PDF presentation of what the notes were going to be. Everything was really seamless. It was organized, very strategic. So definitely impressed with that and your branding and the cover of your podcast. So you're doing really good work. And so you're standing out already and you're doing great work. So be encouraged about that. And that just segues really into kind of who I am and what I do. People, on the outside looking in, they'll see that on my Instagram, I'm a personal brand coach. I'm a marketing guru and a keynote speaker. I wasn't always in the realm of marketing nor personal branding. I grew up in Panama in Central America, in the jungle amongst indigenous tribes. My parents ran a nonprofit that helped provide education for indigenous children, as well as providing medical brigades and orphanage care and many, many other things that we did throughout the years. I lived in Panama a total of 25 years. Before that, I lived in Guatemala. Before that, in Mexico, Canada, Texas, Florida, but I was born in Wisconsin. I'm fully bilingual. Yeah, exactly. It's a lot, but I'm fully bilingual, English and Spanish. I can think and dream and everything in Spanish, just as I do in English. In some respects, both are my heart languages in different ways.
Yeah.
I met my wife in Panama in 2009. She came down to study there for half a year. We got married and we have 4 beautiful daughters. My oldest daughter is 13 right now. My youngest is 6. And throughout the course of those years, those early years, about from 5 years ago to the past, I was involved in international nonprofit work. I traveled to over 40 countries, providing many types of services, community development, urban development. We built homes for people who had lost their homes due to floods. I was in Haiti in 2010 after the earthquake, providing relief work with a team. I organized international arts festivals and conferences, and I just had a really wide array of experiences. When you travel that much and you work with thousands of different people and from many walks of life and every sphere of society, whether that be government, entertainment, communications, or arts, or education or commerce, etc., you get to really see how the fabric of society is formed. You get to see how it's all knit together through numerous individuals playing their parts. And these numerous individuals create a tapestry. And sometimes that tapestry, depending on the society, is a beautiful tapestry, and sometimes it's chaotic. And as a person who was involved in nonprofit work, my goal was to try to help people be who they were designed to be. As we helped heal individuals, then those individuals would excel and thrive and be well. And of course, when individuals thrive and do well, families do well, and then families do well, society does well, right? So, but then in what year was it? 2018, I got diagnosed with liver cancer. So I was 30, and it was a huge wake-up call for me. At the time, it was the second time I had cancer. The first time I had it when I was the first time I was 14 when I had cancer, and we lived in Panama. I went through 8 months of chemotherapy. It was really, really hard, really hard. I was sick for several years. Skin and bones, weighed 125 pounds, was very sick. Kind of going all over the place here with that, but literally when you have that kind of experience at a young age, reality hits the fan really quickly, and you start to realize what matters in life, and not to live a life that's so self-focused and self-absorbed that, so how many times do people go in their life, they go, well, I just worked and I worked and I worked and I worked, and then I was no time for kids, no time for family. I didn't give back. My health deteriorated. When you're young and you're 14 and you're suddenly faced with the reality that life is short and you could die. I had other kids in the cancer ward. Literally, there's one little kid named Oliver. How old was he? 5, I think. He was sitting in my lap while he was receiving chemo. He had a brain tumor, and he was the sweetest little kid and a little Panamanian boy. And we bonded for a couple months. And then one day Oliver wasn't there anymore. And I was like, where's Oliver? And they're like, he sadly passed away. And it just crushed me, because wow, life can be taken away like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very sobering reality to face as a teenager. Most teenagers, there are, of course, many teenagers who have cancer, and most young kids have had some form of trauma in their life. We can talk about that at some point in this podcast, because I'm going to always talk about the trauma. But, but when you're faced with that, you could die at that age. That's not a concept most kids think about. And so that creates a different trajectory. And so people go, David, you're always doing all these different things, and you're living life, and you started 5 businesses, and you blah, 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 blah. And it's because I'm trying to, I want to live, I want the zest of life, the spice of life, and I want to suck the marrow out of life. I want to live life to the fullest in this life. And that leads into the next, of course, however, and basically leaving behind a legacy that leaves impact for my children and their children's children and for others as well. And so it was a natural transition for me. When I got diagnosed with cancer again, I was 30 years old. I remember being devastated, because now at that point, it was very different. At this point, I wasn't a kid dependent on my parents. I was a parent and a husband, and I had kids, 4 daughters. At the time, my youngest had recently just been born, and it was like, okay, And
Yeah.
I remember distinctly sitting in the shower asking God, am I going to die? Like literally.
Yeah.
And literally, I just had this whole like vision come to my mind. And it was about this whole like philanthropic business model. And I had a surgery, and I remember waking up from the surgery and knowing that my days of working in international nonprofit work were over, and that I was supposed to become an entrepreneur, but not just an entrepreneur to be successful, but an entrepreneur that really made an impact and was philanthropic. Mm-hmm. And it was shortly after that I ended up getting recruited by a Korean businessman who owns a mobile app company. And I worked with him, helping him distribute this mobile app from Virginia to Panama, actually. And I was his director of operations. And I marketed the app and ended up on TV and all the things and doing PR stuff. And that was kind of dipping my toe in the water a little bit. Eventually, he's like, David, you're just so good at marketing, he said. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, let's start a marketing agency. So we did. And I did that for a while. And next thing you know, I'm doing marketing for like Toyota in Panama and like marketing for like international entities. And I'm like, who am I? Like, but making these marketing plans and strategies, it was really bizarre. Eventually, I transitioned out of his businesses and started my own marketing agency called Northgate Marketing. And Northgate is all about creating, helping people find their true north, the gateway to the north. I want to help people understand the direction that they need to go to, whether that be from a marketing standpoint or a business standpoint, and now from a personal branding standpoint. Yeah. And I recruited 12 amazing individuals who worked with me from all around the world. We could do marketing in 9 languages because of the team. Wow. Most of them, if not all of them, had previous nonprofit experience. They cared a lot about people. So we had a really wonderful culture. And in that short period of time, within just even 6 months of opening, we had already had clients, I think, in 20 plus states and 4 continents. It was incredible. And so it's been a journey. That's a little bit like foundationally. And I became an award-winning marketing person. I received numerous awards. Now marketing is evolving and it's changing. And it's interesting for someone like myself to be in the world of marketing, considering that I care a lot about like giving back and humanitarian work and such. But we did work for a lot of nonprofits and provided tons of pro bono work. But eventually I got a little burnt out, I'll be honest, in the whole marketing world, because it's very technical and I'm good at it. Yeah. I'm actually very good at it, but I like people more. I like talking to people. I like helping people individually, one-on-one. And I went through a little bit of a transitional crisis. Like, I don't want to call it a midlife crisis, but kind of, because I'm like, okay, I built this business, which is now like a beast, and I can't tame it anymore, and I don't have a life. I'm like working morning, day and night. And, my health was starting to deteriorate again, and I started to like shut down, and that just brings up a lot of questions like, okay, what did I do right? And what did I do wrong? And not to go into all the details of that, but I ended up having to really go, because I started to really shut down. When I say shut down, like my body shut down, like couldn't function, and depression started hitting and all these things. And I'm like, what's going on? And I ended up having a client who works specifically in the area of helping people overcome trauma. And as I was helping her market her coaching business and her keynote speaking business, I began to realize, like, wait a second here. Like, a lot of what she's talking about, I'm dealing with. Like, I'm struggling with that. And so next thing you know, she started to provide me with sessions, and I ended up working for her and helping her develop her coaching business and her theta healing business for a while. And that was really impactful for me, to the level to where I began to work on childhood traumas and things that I had in my life that were just devastating as a child that I hadn't
Yeah.
really wanted to touch on, you know?
Hmm.
And, you know, this is the Bare and Brutal podcast. So, you know,
Hey, you can bear it all.
we bear it all. So I want to ask those who are watching and listening, and you as well, uh, if we look through our life and we think about a trauma that we had as a child, what do we do with that trauma as a kid, usually?
I mean, I would say I can speak for myself. As a kid, I just didn't know what to do with that. So it just kind of got pushed away. But that stuff comes up as an adult. Um, I'm actually in the process of doing like inner child healing work. And my inner child comes up in relationships and how I make decisions, in how I show up when there's conflict, um, and how as a kid, I remember I would go in my room, just deal with it on my own, and not really deal with it, but just cry myself to sleep at some points as a kid. And as an adult, I found that I was doing the same thing. If there was conflict or anything, what did I want to do? I wanted to literally run away, go in my room by myself, and just sit there and deal with the mess and not communicate or anything, because that wasn't something that was taught to me. That's not how I handled conflict as a kid, and that's how I ended up handling conflict as an adult. I didn't handle it. So,
Well, exactly what you did is what I did as well. And actually, most people do. Um,
mhm,
when we are children, especially if we don't have maybe a close relationship with our parents to where we feel like we can tell them what happened, sometimes it's the parents themselves who are the cause of it. So, you know,
yeah,
other times it's not, but we don't have a relationship with the parents. So we can't, not to that level to where we feel like we can be that vulnerable. And so as a kid, we, especially if it happens between the ages of, say, 4 and 7, especially 4 and 8,
mhm,
those are years in which our brain is like a sponge. It absorbs everything that happens and it assimilates, and it doesn't quite know what is real and what is true and what is just not real. Okay. And so it's called, in that state of mind, we're in the theta brainwave state, because there's different brainwaves that we have as human beings,
mhm,
you know, beta, gamma, theta, etc. The theta brainwave is the state of deep creativity and deep meditation. It's kind of like a bliss, euphoric state where, as grown-ups, we'll experience this as we wake up from sleep. We're
mhm,
aware that we're waking up, but we're also kind of asleep, and we can kind of drift between dream and reality, you know? And
yeah,
I'm sure we've all experienced that. We also have that a little bit as we fall asleep. We can also have it in moments like yesterday. I was sitting out over the lake and I was on a rock and I was looking out at the water and I was just thinking deeply, and it was really beautiful. And I just kind of, I don't even know, just kind of drifted into deep, deep thought where about a half hour had passed by and it felt like 2 minutes, because I just kind of like was deep in thought. And it's not,
yeah,
in that state, it's not the conscious mind that's driving the steering wheel, which is normally what was driving. It was the subconscious mind, the thoughts that happen
mhm,
on the background. Like even now, as we're doing this podcast, I'm engaged with you with words coming out of my mouth, but in the back of my mind, I'm having other thoughts of things I need to do, or like memories I have of children and as a child and what that was like. And our brain is so
right,
complex and it goes all these different directions. And so in the uh, uh, theta healing was the coaching that I got from this woman, and it was amazing because I began to go back. As a child, I had been molested numerous times at a young age, and
mhm,
it was really hard. And it was done by people who should have been safe, but they weren't.
mhm,
And I've, like most people, blamed myself. I tucked it away because to face the reality at that age is too hard. It's too hard because what do you do with it? Where do you go with it? And so I swept it under the rug, as most people do in those situations, no matter what the trauma is. That's a severe one. But many of us have had extreme ones at different types. And there is no such thing as an extreme or unextreme trauma, by the way. Trauma is trauma is trauma. So if it's traumatic for you, it's traumatic for you. So, and then I didn't tell anybody. I told no one. I don't think I told anyone until I was 17 for the first time in a young adults group. I was attending a Korean camp in Canada, of all things. And I shared there with some guys, and because they were trying to help, so I just did. And then at 19, I finally told my parents. And so what had happened, without giving even details at that point, but I'm talking a whole young, through my teenage years and young years, kept that to myself. Yeah. And I began to, as many things, when there's trauma, it creates, so if we look at our life as a tapestry, and each thread of our tapestry is a different experience or a different pattern that forms, and these things weave together to form the tapestry, right? And if you have something traumatic that happens, it disrupts the pattern and it begins to integrate into your life in a way, it feels normal for us to have it there because it's kind of always been there. And we get used to it being there. And that's why you say, Michelle, that it comes out in your relationship sometimes or in your adult life. It comes out that way for everybody. And so trauma does that because trauma is an energy. Trauma, it is so unbearable for us to carry unless we release it. That the easiest way, because we don't know often how to release it, is to just cope with it and bring it into our life. And the way people cope is through 4 ways. There's probably more, but these are 4 primary ways. Number 1 is a coping mechanism. It's like I'm going to pretend it's not there by buffering it down or muting it down. So for some people that might be drugs or alcohol or relationships or shopping. For me, it was work. For me, as long as I kept busy, I didn't have to think about it. So I was always multitasking, always doing different things all the time. And it was also like a little bit of the savior complex. Like I'm going to help other people so I don't have to think about myself. And so it's kind of that coping. The other way is superiority. So I don't want to get hurt again. So I'm going to put myself above everybody else. So therefore, no one can ever hurt me again. And it's actually an extreme insecurity when you see people who are operating in superiority, but they look strong and fierce, but they're actually falling apart and breaking. But they are too afraid to face that reality that they elevate themselves above others so no one can harm them. The other is inferiority, to where I'm no good. Don't look at me. Like, ha ha ha, I'm doing this, but not really. And then we actually put out our mistakes more than we should because we think somehow that hides it. And so we prefer to blend in the wallpaper and not exist or be seen. Because if we're seen, then we'll be exposed. And no one wants to be exposed because we all function in this vicious cycle of shame, fear, and control. When something happens to us, no matter even as an adult or as a child, the first thing, if it's a negative thing, the first thing we feel is shame. Because anytime something traumatic happens, I don't know if you've been in a situation to where maybe you're in the cafeteria at school and you spill the milk on the floor and everybody's looking at you. The first thing you feel is shame. You're like, I can't believe I just did that. Then you feel fear because I'm being judged. And then you try to control it. Now, in that situation, the person who is the coping mechanism person might be like, become the class clown and be like, ha ha ha, who spilled, can't cry over spilled milk, make a joke about it. The person who's superior might get angry and lash out at everybody and say, shut up, stop judging me. the inferior person might run away and like throw up in the bathroom because they were so embarrassed. And the other one is, the fourth one is denial, denying it even happened. The trauma happened. And so that denial goes into, well, I didn't do it, or that never happened, or it fell. And then we don't take ownership of it. So we live in this constant state of denial. The truth is, we almost all operate in all four of those things at one given point or another. But none of them are addressing the root cause. It's all masking it. It's all covering it. And so if we want to get to the root cause, we have to go back to the original trauma, and we don't want to go there. So in that theta healing state, I had to go back because patterns were happening in my life as a result of that early trauma I had had, that I was working myself to death practically because I couldn't deal with the fact that these things happened and were still very much present in my daily life. So I masked it by being really busy and helping other people with their problems. Now I'm still doing that. I'm helping other people with their problems, but it's from a totally different standpoint now compared to where it was before. I don't need to do it anymore for me. I want to do it. Big difference. Right. And so that was revolutionary for me in getting healing in that area, and to the level to where I became a certified theta healing practitioner. And I've now provide that as a personal brand coach in my packages if my clients want it. Because trauma, anybody who wants to become an entrepreneur or wants to become successful or become an influencer or whatever it is, if your trauma is there, it's always going to be in the way. And you're going to self-sabotage, and you're not going to quite make it to the level that you need to. And so I bring it up because I'm like, I've coached or consulted well over 400 individuals at this point in the last 4 years. And everybody has trauma. Everybody does. And when they're healed from that trauma, man, it just unlocks new patterns in their life to where they no longer have to include that. They're able to walk in a new form of reality, life, manifestation, etc. So.
Wow. Well, a lot to unpack there. You pretty much touched on a lot that I was going to ask you about. One, I just want to talk about how powerful and courageous of a being that you are. One, to have that moment where you realize, oh, something needs to change. There's something happening here that I need to deal with. And then taking that step to even do that work, that is so hard. And there are people who will stay in that kind of denial or masking state that you were talking about for their entire lives, because it's so painful to dive into your trauma. It is not an easy feat to go in there, take some self-inventory, and say, yeah, these things happen to me. I've been avoiding it. Let's dive into it. That's so hard. So bravo to you for having that moment and just going in and doing the work.
Well, it's not just a moment. I'm still doing it, to be honest. And I think we all do. We live in a society, unfortunately, where it's a buffet society, and we have way too many coping mechanisms within easy grasp. Mm-hmm. Social media is case in point, one of them. Entertainment and media, food, Amazon, shopping, anything we want, we can now have it so quickly. We're afraid of the silence of of being by ourselves, because if I'm by myself and I have to think about what actually happened, it's too painful. So we keep it buffered by being distracted. But the truth is that every day, little micro traumas happen. We might not want to call it that, but every day little things happen. Little tiffs with our loved ones, or at work, or even with our parents, or within ourselves, or a friend. And we constantly need to keep things in check all the time and go introspective and process. How many times do people actually process their days anymore? what happened, what was positive, what was negative, what did I feel, what did I do that? We don't. We go. We oftentimes wake up. The first thing we do when we wake up is look at our phones. We see what kind of clicks we got and engagement we got in our social media. Then we look at our emails, and then we kind of quickly eat breakfast, maybe grab a Starbucks on the go. We do our work, we go home, we quickly have supper, we watch TV, we fall asleep looking at our phones, and that's our day. And that's not the way the human condition was meant to be. We were meant to be human beings living in nature, frankly, outdoors, taking walks in gardens and amongst trees and in the prairies and the meadows or the beach, and soaking in our reality and being in the moment, loving our relationships without distraction, and really getting time alone with yourself, with God, depending on what people believe. It's just we need time, but we don't take time.
Yeah.
And so healing trauma is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing. It's a daily thing. It's a lifestyle. And people, healthy people help heal people, and hurt people hurt people. And so society, if you look around right now, there's a lot of anger in a lot of categories, a lot of anger. There's a lot of hurt in society, whether we look at it politically, culturally, racially, in any component. And how do we heal trauma in society? How do we help individuals truly love their neighbor? Mm-hmm. They have to love themselves first. And how many of us don't love ourselves?
None. It's hard. Yeah, you said it, like hurt people hurt people. And you talked about how there's a lot of anger, and it actually made me think of my own work in therapy. I remember my therapist pulling out an emotions wheel, and on that wheel it has literally a list of just different emotions: sadness, embarrassment, shame, whatever it is. And a lot of the times, frustration, annoyance, it all has some kind of base into another feeling, right? And so for me, I felt so much resentment, so much anger towards people who did things to me as a child, or where I felt slighted, or I also have my fair share of trauma, like we all do. And at that time, I just held it all in. And she made me realize that, anger was how I try to keep those emotions, or like the hard trauma, at bay. Like, I function through anger as a coping mechanism, as to protect myself. But underneath the anger, it wasn't really the base feeling was not anger. It was sadness, really, I think.
Fear, just probably fear.
Inner child, like you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Fear, sadness, and when you don't deal with those underlying feelings, then you're just going to keep functioning as an angry person, at least for me. So, yeah.
It's true. It's true. And, you talk about anger, and, oh, trust me, I know anger. I know that emotion very deeply. The way anger works is in different forms, but if I can describe it this way, is a trauma happens. Conflict, bullying, you name it, okay? Whatever it is, a harsh word from a parent. And at first, when it first happens to a child, as an example, let's just say one day you're minding your own business and you're doing your thing, and mom and dad got in a fight, and all of a sudden mom randomly just yells at you because she's stressed and she's not monitoring her emotions in that moment. So she just goes, bah. And you're just like, at first as a child, you're like, why is mom who's the nurturer yelling at me, and I didn't do anything wrong. And then as a kid, we assimilate and we go, maybe it's something I did something wrong. And we begin to process and we get this anxiety, right? But the anxiety is overwhelming. So, like we all know, we then go, I need to cope. And we bury it under we sweep it under the rug, we bury it away. And what happens to anything that remains stagnant over time is it begins to become putrid. It festers, it gets gross, right? And it needs to be released. But if it's not released, what happens is that all that icky pain turns from pain to a burden now you're having to carry. And it's extra baggage and a burden. And if you keep getting more and more of those repeatedly over time, you carry that and it becomes so heavy that you're constantly in a state of where your nervous system is agitated, where you're constantly on the defense because you're like, I can't handle one more thing thrown at me because you keep carrying it yourself. And so then what happens is, as a defense mechanism, not only are we agitated and frustrated at this point, we're angry innately as a form of protecting ourselves from getting more stuff thrown at us. And so it becomes this defense mechanism to protect yourself from getting hurt. And anger is an energy that is very, very harsh on the body. It's very harsh on the body. A lot of people who struggle with anger will have all kinds of health issues. Yeah, heart issues, liver issues. It's directly oftentimes correlated with bitterness, that whole festering, gross, fermenting, ickiness is bitterness. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you, but it's there. It's an energy that drains. And anger is unfortunately contagious. When someone's angry, other people feel that as well. They feel the energy in the room shift. And then but one thing about anger is we think, well, what is the opposite of anger?
Opposite of anger, like joy.
We would think so. It should be joy. Joy is when we're feeling joy, we feel strong. The opposite of anger is peace. So, if we look at any war-torn country or any type of crisis situation, there's a lot of anger. We have a lot of anger right now in our universities, no matter what side you look at or whatever. I'm not going to get into all that. But there's anger, and hurt. It stemmed from hurt and an injustice, and then it turns into anger, an outcry of anger. The opposite of anger is peace, when finally things are settled and things have healed. So we get peace. How? By having an inner clarity, an inner transformation where the trauma is transformed. And that takes time, but peaceful people are not angry people. You can't have both anger and peace at the same time. It's impossible. Yeah. So, and when you see, this is why it's so important in any relationship to resolve a conflict quickly, because the anger stored up turns into bitterness and resentment. And that marriage or that boyfriend-girlfriend relationship or that business partnership or those best friends or mom and dad relationship, whatever it is, isn't going to be okay until that conflict is resolved and peace is made. Now, peace is a total opposite energy of anger. Anger is high friction and tension. Peace is whole and airy and breathy and wonderful. And in that place of peace, we can then operate and have joy. The opposite of fear is love. You cannot feel loved by someone but also be afraid of them. Yeah, it's not a thing. If we look at that children who've had parents who are abusive or verbally abusive, you can't actually receive love from that parent if you're afraid of them. Yeah. So love casts out fear, and fear keeps us trapped. And so how many of us make decisions in life based on fear and what's going to happen? Fear of being rejected, fear of being yelled at, fear of being an outcast, fear of being inadequate, fear of being harmed. We make decisions about it. And fear is a trap. It keeps us trapped and locked away to where we are not able to love others nor receive love, because that fear becomes our prison that we live in. And we get so comfortable and so used to that prison, as dreary and dark as it is, it becomes a refuge of sorts to where we're very comfortable in fear. And that's not a good place to be, because fear drains us. Fear is awful. It's awful. And when you're afraid, you can't sleep, you can't have relationships, you can't function, and give it time, and it'll start manifesting in your body as well. Perfect love cast out fear. So we need to find healing so that we can rid ourselves of shame and fear and control and the anger, receive peace and joy. And so as a personal brand coach, I help individuals really hone in on discovering themselves, who they are, their essence, their personality, their gift sets, their strengths, their weaknesses. I help them assess where they're going to be, where they want to be in 5 years, 10 years, their business, develop their business plans, develop their marketing plans, help them with their personal image and their elevator pitches. And they're helping them hone in on many, many things that are PR tactics and media tactics. But that's all fine and dandy. But that's not going to be effective if people are not able to function in a way that they can be their authentic selves without the defense mechanisms, loving who they are, knowing their design, knowing their destiny, being comfortable, forgiving others, and moving on. Right. They're always going to self-sabotage. And unfortunately, we end up with politicians and world leaders and celebrities and influencers who have a lot of trauma. And the consequence of that trauma, unfortunately, affects millions of others around them. The more authority you carry, the more responsibility you carry, the more people are going to be hurt. So it's so important so I'm a weird combo. I'm a weird person that delves this marketing, personal branding with this theta healing and inner healing work. Yeah. But I found it works.
Yeah, it does work. I think, when I was doing my homework on you, I had a whole almost 2 pages of notes because I was like, oh my gosh, David does so much. And hearing you talk about this, I think that your certified theta healing practitioner, it goes hand in hand with your personal branding, because if your clients or whoever can't deal with their trauma and process through those really tough things that they may have experienced, how are they even going to begin to identify who they are and who they want to show up to be? If you're trapped in that state of, being stagnant and angry and staying in your fear. So that's actually great. One of my questions is, my audience, just because I'm in my 20s, naturally my audience also is in their 20s, early 30s. And so I guess my question is, what is your greatest piece of advice for someone in their 20s who is struggling how to define who they are? Now, let's say that they are still doing the work. They've started on dealing with their trauma. And obviously we talked about it's a continuous thing. We don't just deal with it and we're done. But now they're ready to kind of level up and define, who am I? So how do you even begin to discover your true identity? And then, can you just speak on that? How do you even begin to give advice to someone?
Yeah. So whenever that question comes up, and I have a tagline on my website. If you go to my website, you'll see the first page says, so you want the world to know who you are, but do you even know who you are? And so if we want I mean, I think most people want to be successful. To be successful, you have to be able to engage with people to a level to where they trust you, believe in you, in your business, your product, your service. And people nowadays, and I mean more and more with the level of people aren't going to go to some corporate. People don't want a corporate experience as much. They want a personal one-on-one connection with someone. And whether you're the owner of the business or you're a sales rep, doesn't matter. They still want a human connection. People are starving for it. COVID, in the year 2020, we saw how much people were starving for connection.
Yeah.
And so basically, it's really important to know who you are, to know your design, to know, because each person's unique. No one is the same. Every single individual, I believe every individual is created in God's image and likeness. That's my, and I see that. You are innately valuable. Like, you are so special. Like, no one is like you. Like, and with that trait of charisma, when I talk about, I have a workshop I do on embracing your authentic self. What is your authentic self? What does self even mean? Self is made of many, 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 many parts. It's DNA level from our parents. It's, how we were raised by our parents. It's the name we were given that carries a mantle over our lives. Because names have meaning, and that puts attributes on us. It could be the relationship to our siblings. It might be the type of house we grew up in. Did we live on a farm or in the city? Did we have animals or not have animals? Were one of our parents sick and we had to care for them? Were our parents, that's part of our story, and it forms our personality. Then it's our hobbies, and maybe it was a teacher we had in school who inspired us to really like this topic, and so we started diving into it. And maybe it was our friends who then influenced us, and we had certain hobbies we did with them in sports we got involved in or not. And then it could be music and movies and pop culture, and education, of course, is a big part of it. Religion. If you have a certain worldview or religious perspective that was passed down to you, that can affect it. Cultural identity is a big one. Cultural heritage, the state or city you grew up in, the country you're from. If you're multicultural, maybe your parents are second or first generation immigrants, whatever it be. All of these things form the tapestry of who you are. And then within that, these things hone in on our interest and desires for a career, to therefore we think, I want to do this, but we don't often understand, why did that happen? Why is it that I wanted to do X, Y, Z as a career? Or did I just do it because I thought I had to please my parents, or because that was what was expected of me by my family or my peers? Or was it because I was operating in fear? So I chose the easy route, push the easy button, instead of doing what I really wanted to do. Whatever it is.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, please do.
David, what I'm hearing is that people will try to find their identity by looking outwards, right? They'll ask, maybe what are some expectations that my family members have of me, or what's the trending thing right now? But what I'm hearing from you is that the trick to finding what self is and your identity is looking inwards instead of outwards.
It's looking in. Well, I would say it is looking inwards. It's looking outwards, because we do have to understand, because we don't want to deny who we are. We can't deny our childhood existence. I was molested as a child. That happened. Yeah. I was raised in Panama amongst indigenous tribes. Yeah. That directly forms a part of who I am. Even right now, I'm wearing a necklace from the indigenous village I grew up in amongst. So it's part of who I am. And yet we can't deny it. I mean, how many people of us want to deny our childhood existence because maybe we had a bad experience and we don't want to, but there are gifts and there are curses in all things in life, where there's good and there's bad. It's never only good. It's never only bad in society, because we live in a freaking messed up world. We just do. And there's good things and there's bad things, and good stuff happens and bad stuff happens. We need to be able to really, yes, look inward and know ourselves, we also have to understand what were the gifts that were given to me because of my upbringing. For me, having cancer at age 14, as much as that should seem like a curse, was actually a blessing, because as hard as it was, it formed me and matured me in so many ways that made me who I am today. So every trauma can be turned to a transformation. So yes, it is going inward, but it's also going outward. I also, and I don't say this kind of stuff very often because I know everybody has different perspectives and views, but I also go upward. I look at God and I'm like, okay, what are the things that I am as a result of that?
Yeah.
And so, I believe we all have a destiny. So with that being said, it's inward, it's outward, it's upward. That's what I tell people. Okay. Mm. And so all of those things combined, because we're not one-dimensional beings, we are multi-dimensional beings with numerous desires and wants and things. And then when we get married or we get into a relationship, that form, our spouse or our loved one or our partner comes in play, and that forms, and we have children, and all of a sudden that's part of who, you know what I mean? So it's never one-dimensional. We are body, we are mind, we are spirit, we're emotions, we're will, we're many things. And also every stage of life changes us. You're in your 20s right now, and you're in a stage of life where you're, in a way, kind of starting, your life and your career. But you know what? Try things. What I tell people, try things. Go inward, go outward, go upward. But then be willing to take the risk to try things, because I tried a lot of things until I finally got to where I'm at today. I worked in numerous different nonprofits. I traveled the world. I got involved in different businesses. And then I started a marketing agency, and I started a interior design business, and I started this and the other. And now I'm doing what I'm doing today, which is personal brand coaching and theta healing and keynote speaking, which is what I love, 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 love. I love it. It's exactly where I need to be, exactly the type of work I need to be doing. It's what I excel in. It's what I'm good at. However, I'm able to be a personal brand coach because of my marketing background. I was able to be in marketing because of my nonprofit background. And I was able to get into nonprofit background because of the way that I was raised as a child. So nothing is wasted. It's all built upon each other in order for that to serve the existence that I have today. So we need to really enjoy the journey and understand that it's okay to try different things and to make mistakes, and to know that many things in life are seasonal. Even this podcast, you might not be doing this for the next 10 years. You might only be doing it for a couple of years. We don't know, but it's never wasted. It's never wasted. This is an experience you're having right now that is giving you value, that someday, even if you decided not to continue doing the podcast, you could say previous podcast host, blah, 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 this many episodes. Yeah. And it serves you in your resume. It serves you in your life experience. There are people that you're meeting. You're meeting me today. Like, we're talking. We're probably going to be connected for many years, I'm hoping, via social media and other things. And so nothing is wasted. All things work out. And so with that being said, enjoy the journey. As young people, be willing to take risks, enjoy the journey, take time off for yourself. Don't stress. Someday, we always look at the world today and we see how many people, they work, and then they retire, but they're too old to do anything. So go backpacking in Europe and go volunteer at a nonprofit internationally. Do some relief work. Take a road trip with your friends. Take 6 months living abroad. Learn another language. Don't be in such a hurry to get everything in order, because your youth is valuable. And it's so important to understand that. I'll be honest. I went to school when I went to university, I went to study culinary arts. So I'm a certified chef. That's a cool part of what I did. I'm not in the food industry.
Yeah, I was like, that's a complete left field.
But at the time, I thought I wanted to be a chef. And so I went to school for it. Now, today, I'm not sure I would have done that anymore. Now, was it a waste of my time? Not necessarily, because going to that and doing that was very fulfilling at the time. I learned a ton, and I started a YouTube show about food, and I did catering for a bit, and I did events and things. But but where it's worked for me is now I do interior design and marketing for a lot of restaurants, and because I understand the food industry, it served me, right? But with that being said, I always tell people, we're always such in a hurry to go to college right away. university right after graduating from high school. I mean, you just graduated from high school. Like, are you ready to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life? Probably not.
Exactly.
Very few people are. And so are you going to discover that by attending all these different classes? And no, you need to discover this. How? Go volunteer. This is what I tell people. Go volunteer for 5 or 6 months in a foreign country, in an impoverished nation, and you will start to know what really matters. You'll learn yourself. You'll experience other people, other cultures, other languages. You'll see what really matters. You'll go home with a totally different perspective. And so if I could give any advice to young people, is stop being in such a hurry to get your career in place and enjoy the journey a little bit. And then also, secondly, when you do start your career, understand that it's ever evolving. It's going to always evolve simply by the nature of life evolves. Marketing, as a prime example, is evolving. When AI technology came in, it changed marketing. In 2.5, 3 years, we're going to have quantum computers. When that pairs up with AI technology, it's going to change everything. So many careers are going to change anyway. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to school and you shouldn't get a job right away, and you probably have bills to pay and you want to help your family or whatever it is. I get your circumstance, but enjoy your life. Go introspective, go extrospective, and go uprospective is what I tell people. Not a word, but if we do those 3 things, know yourself, know others, know God, love yourself, love others, get to know that God loves you, frankly, and you're going to be great. You're going to be great.
Yeah. So I think, David, your experience having cancer at such a young age and facing death at such a young age, I think that has played such a huge part in how you carry yourself through life. I mean, you learned at 14 that you cannot take your life for granted. And I feel like that's something that people don't learn until way later in their lives. That's why we have these midlife crises, because people are like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing for the past 35 years? I need to start living life. So I guess my question is, I'm thinking, there are people who have also been in those circumstances, right? Where they face death or they go through really life-changing things that cause a lot of pain. So you can go one of 2 ways, right? You can turn that pain into purpose, which I think is something you have completely done in your life. But then there's also other people who take that pain and they just harbor it and they become bitter, or they become almost kind of like a martyr. They're like, yeah, why me? I went through something tough, and you did. Like, I want to validate that, but what's your advice for someone who wants to turn their pain into purpose, but is so stuck in that pain, kind of like stuck in being the victim of their pain?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So one thing I'll put into perspective is that if you live to be 95, you will live 34,675 days. Okay. That's not that many days when we consider it. Okay. So I just turned 38. I've lived 13,870 days already. Okay. Life is short. Each day goes by, come and goes. And that's if you live to be 95. We don't know where we're going to die.
Yeah.
So would you rather, you have no guarantee of your life. You have no idea how long you're going to live. Some people, like Oliver, died when he's 5.
Yeah.
Some people live to be 103. We have no guarantee. So with that being said, do you really want to carry wounds and trauma and pain and agony with you the rest of your life? If I can tell anyone listening to focus on anything, get the help you need today. Prioritize getting healing.
Mhm.
Now, I have my own perspectives on healing, as I've shared many of these things here. There's different modalities, there's different ways, but ultimately, you need to get the healing that you need. How many people carry this with them their whole life? I used to work as a teenager, I worked at nursing homes, cleaning beds and changing sheets and things. And there were some very kind, sweet old men and women, and there were some very angry, cantankerous, embittered old people. And you're like, wow, this person like literally, like they're dying angry. Like, what a way to live, you know? And so prioritize it, because it's not going to go anywhere. You think you can kid yourself all you want. Now, how do you prioritize it? By prioritizing it. So I remember a shift happened for me about 2 years ago where suddenly I'm like, I'm going to make this a priority. So I went to EMDR therapy. I did theta healing. I did different other modalities. I probably was seeing at any given point 3 to 4 different people from different perspectives, and everybody was helping me with different facets. And it just needed to be a priority. And maybe you can't afford it. Well, you know what? If you do have insurance, you can at least get a therapist. Maybe you can't afford it. Well, then go, you can't find a coach to do this, or you can't afford theta healing sessions. Okay, no problem. There are plenty of nonprofits and entities, or even, there's so many resources out there where you don't have to pay a penny to get help. There's also people in our lives who are safe people. They're friends of ours. They might not be equipped maybe to help us, but sometimes just talking about it and letting it out is enough to start with. And so come up to a friend or a loved one and say, I just want to talk to you about something that happened to me. I've never shared this before. And is it okay if I share this with you? And remember that our trauma is like pearls. Okay. They're precious. It's not as difficult as they are. Trauma is like sand inside the oyster that agitates and irritates, and the oyster begins to cover it up with layers and layers and layers until it becomes this precious, priceless pearl. That's what your trauma is. So be careful who you share your pearls with, because not everybody can handle it, and not everybody's worthy of it. But it's important to let it out. That's one advice. And I guess the other thing is, as much as we are to focus on it for a season, we also need to then when we start to release it, we need to walk in that new reality of releasing it. And that's a daily mindset thing, to where we're no longer making decisions based on trauma, but we're operating in a way that we're no longer subjective to it, but we're looking at it from the objective standpoint. So you're not in the war movie getting the bullets everywhere. You're watching the war movie. It's a totally different perspective. You're no longer subjugated to these realities. So it's a beautiful thing when you can walk above that in a very awakened state, to where you go, I see that pattern now, and I'm not playing that game anymore. And it's not a fear thing. It's just you're no longer playing that game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. That's powerful. One, all these analogies you're using are bringing my former English teacher heart so much joy. I love the analogies you're using. But you mentioned resources, right? There's tons of resources out there for people to just start to deal with their trauma and healing. And I would like to say that you are actually a great resource for people too. You mentioned briefly earlier about the workshops that you have, and how the theta healing is also something that you offer your clients. Can you speak about that and what someone can gain from working with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're interested in working with me, go to davidallentracy.com. And there's a tab there called Theta Healing. You can book an initial consultation with me for 30 minutes at no cost whatsoever. It's completely free. That will kind of allow me to understand and know you better and see if we're a good fit. And I'll share my rates. accordingly. I do theta healing sessions remotely or in person. I live in Florida right now. So, if you're in Florida and in the central Florida area, we can meet in person. Otherwise, most of my clients do it virtual, which is great as well. That's the theta healing. Now on the, you mentioned the workshops. That's the Brand Masters Collective. So I have a bi-weekly workshop we provide every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Tuesday at 12 p.m. Central. And where are you based again, Michelle?
Dallas.
So you're in Central Time. So 12 p.m. on Tuesdays and 7 p.m. on Thursdays. So our Tuesday sessions are all on inner healing, health, wellness, more holistic, like your mental health and well-being. Our Thursdays are on all things personal branding. So whether that be marketing strategies and lead generation and Instagram and charismatic stage presence and like how to dress for success and blah, blah, blah. So I have like keynote speakers on those ones who are like accomplished authors or stage performers or fashion designers, stylists for celebrities, the makeup artist that done makeup for Susan Sarandon, for example, and different ones. So that we have a great lineup of speakers, very practical. And you get to, if you attend the lives, you can ask questions to our presenters. This year, we already have 96 speakers. It's incredible from all over the world. If you can't make the live, no problem, because we have a video resource library where you can watch not only the ones that just happened, but you can go to the past and watch any of our former videos as well. That platform also includes membership discounts to affiliate partners. You get like 10 to 20% off. So if you become a member, for example, and you want to use my marketing agency services, you automatically get a 10% discount on all things marketing. And then what else? It also has a Facebook group, and we have events we host every year, and members get 10% discounts for our international retreats. So that is only $19 a month for 8 workshops and everything else I told you. So it's a really good value. I'm offering your listeners a first month free by using the code BeMyGuest2024. And I'm sure that, Michelle, you'll be providing those links and things. But basically, I would highly recommend that everyone join. I think it's a lot of fun. We have conversations, a lot of like what we had today on our Tuesdays, but it's coming from experts in numerous modalities of healing. So it's a great touch point each week. So whether it's breath work or how to restore your nervous system or embracing your authentic self or more in depth on maybe nutrition, it's just, there's different things we'll touch on Tuesdays. Yeah. So highly recommended. And would love to hear from you guys.
Awesome. Well, so cool. Thank you, one, for being so generous and offering listeners a first free month. That's great. Just the fact that you've created access to a community of successful leaders. I think one thing that I am really stepping into right now in my life is taking advantage of mentorship, because there are people out there like you who are successful entrepreneurs, and I've noticed that these successful people, they are so willing to be mentors to people. They're so willing to give advice and give their wisdom, and just being open to those opportunities and connecting with those people is the other part, right? Like they can be there and be willing to give you those things, but on the other end, like I have to be okay with asking and being like, hey, can you be my mentor? Can you, are you open to getting some time out of your day to speak about these things? But that's great that the Brand Masters Collective is just kind of like a one-stop shop almost for people to come in and ask those questions to those really successful people and get resources like that. That's amazing.
It's a great resource. It just is. And I'm meeting all these incredible people every week, and many of them becoming friends. It's just phenomenal. And I mean, to have this kind of access for only $19 is like really, really incredible. You can go to Starbucks twice for that, or you can have 8 workshops. So it's a really good, really good value. Yeah. So, and like I said too, I'm also a keynote speaker. So I travel and I speak and I do conferences. I'll do workshops if you want workshops on
Mhm.
I talk on many, many topics, as you can tell, but, you know, if anyone listening wants to have me come present at their event, I would love to talk, and be your keynote speaker. So
Yeah. So this is kind of one of the last things I wanted to touch on before we wrap up here, but it is so evident, David, that you are a man of many passions and many interests. And I think that's so great and inspiring because as a society, it's kind of ingrained in us and almost a pressure to decide exactly the one thing that is you and what you want to do for the rest of your life. I mean, like you said earlier, you get out of high school and they're like, hey, what are you going to do for your career? And you're like, what? I don't even know what I want for breakfast. How am I supposed to decide the one thing that's going to be my thing for the next 20 plus years? So for you, though, you lived through example of being a person who explores your many different interests and your many different passions. And I'd love it if you could just expand on how you got into I guess, a comfortable space where you allowed yourself to explore those different avenues. Because I mean, I can speak for myself. I think it is daunting to go and jump from a passion to another passion because people see that and they're like, oh, you're like a flight risk. Like, you can't make up your mind. But no, it's okay for us to have multiple interests. It's actually unrealistic for us not to have multiple interests. So, can you speak on that? How did you navigate kind of managing people's expectations and tapping into your love of all these different things?
yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the reality is like, okay, the way I think about it is that I don't want to do a career because I have to. I want my career to be my hobby or my hobbies.
Yeah.
So I naturally have a passion for all things related to branding. So, of course, I own a marketing agency. And what is branding? It's identity. It's brand identity for a business.
Yeah.
And that incorporates design elements and narratives and storytelling and all the things. Then I also own an interior design company. What is interior design ultimately? It's branding for a space. It's it's color, it's design, it's live in, it's about storytelling, it's a narrative for the people who live in that space or work in the space if it's commercial. In the personal branding space, it's branding for individuals, for people. It's the design of the individual, the identity of the individual. I'm actually kind of doing the same thing in three categories. I also am a part owner of a travel agency. And what are we doing in that? We're branding experiences for people. And so it's kind of all the same thing in my mind. Now, the other thing is that I'm looking to create a symbiotic ecosystem. When we look at a healthy ecosystem in nature, we'll see how the tree provides shade and fruits for like the monkeys. The monkeys eat the fruits, but then the fruits fall to the ground. The fruit decays and the larvae and bugs eat the decaying fruit, and then the seeds are eaten by the birds, and then the birds go to the bathroom and that fertilizes the soil, and there's mushrooms and fungi that grows under the surface, and then it goes to the roots, and it creates this cyclical circle of life kind of a thing, right? So basically, if you can create a business that, if you are interested in becoming a serial entrepreneur and create numerous different businesses, look at the way that these things can symbiotically interconnect and benefit the whole. So as an example, now with that being said, disclaimer, I didn't start them all at the same time. I did one, got that going until it was, going fine, and then I did the other. But like literally, I started with the marketing agency, and then as we began to do marketing, uh, there were restaurants and businesses who said, "Hey, can you do our branding and our website and our social media and our photography and our video production?" And we're like, "Sure thing." And so I would ask about, okay, what about your interior design and how that correlates with the branding? And they wouldn't know. So next thing you know, I'm doing interior design for them, for their space, so that the entire experience is this one cohesive, seamless experience. It's not all hodgepodge and piecemeal. And so next thing you know, I started Eastbridge Interiors. And Eastbridge is, so I grew up in Chinatown as well in Panama for a while. And I love, like, 14% of the population of Panama is from China, or Chinese immigrants. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it's massively huge Chinese influence. So a lot of, I love myself some like dim sum and some dumplings and some, like, duck and stir, yeah, all the things. Right. And
Okay,
so,
David, coming in
you
with the
know,
culture.
right. I love food. So basically, and you need to check out my YouTube show, Midnight Food Coma. You'll love it. Midnight Food Coma. It's all Asian food. It's super fun and out there. But basically, that East Bridge is the bridge that bridges East meets West aesthetics. So it's the idea of the Eastern mindset for aesthetics with Western structural components. So I have this whole biophilic element to it, and I almost always have an Asian bent to my interior design. Don't have to only, I can do different styles, but that's my general taste. And very eclectic. Then the personal brand coaching, I mean, it kind of went without saying that it would happen, because as I was meeting these individuals, I realized that they needed coaching as individuals too. For a lot of startup companies, they don't have a budget for a big lots of thousands of dollars of advertising. So they are the advertising, they themselves, whether they go to networking groups and they're handing out their card, or they're, doing a reel on social media. It's whatever they can do for free. So I began to coach them on things that they could do. And my background too, I didn't mention this, but I had worked with a 5-time Grammy award-winning singer from Latin America in my young adult years. And that gave me tons of experience at huge, massive concerts and events and book signings and, shaking hands, et cetera, et cetera. I organized fashion runway shows as well and different things. And so within the personal branding space, you'll notice on my website that in addition to personal branding and marketing and PR and media and the theta healing, I also do personal styling for people, which is such a random thing. But with my background in design, whether that be branding design, interior design, marketing, what is the design part for an individual? One of the biggest and easiest ways to do that is their personal style. How do you dress? What makes you stand out in the crowd? So I will literally help, like, my keynote speaker clients, as an example, decide what to wear on stage. So we'll look at, like, the background and the setting and the event and the colors of the event and what's going to make them stand out. And across the board, when I do these kind of things, my clients get the most tags, the most mentions, the most photos, the most videos, the most selfies, and they look really great on stage, and it's practical for the type of event, and they don't, like, blend into the wallpaper. They stand out, and they're memorable, because that's the number one rule of personal branding. Well, number one is being authentic. Number two is being memorable. But literally, so yeah, in my mind, when I tell people, when it comes to doing numerous things, try to do your hobbies. Start with one thing, get that thing going. Make sure the next thing you do works seamlessly with the other things, so that it doesn't disrupt, but it plays tag with it. And so you're running a marathon with all 3 or 4 or 5, whatever businesses you're going to do. Understand that for me, doing these businesses, it's been about a 5.5 year process. That I have these 3 or 4 businesses. It didn't happen overnight. So.
Right. No, that's definitely great advice, and also really important to highlight that it didn't happen overnight, because I think we live in a world where we just want instant gratification. And I mean, we get everything at our fingertips, entertainment and everything. And so we expect success to almost be something that's instantaneous, and that's just not realistic. I mean, you had to work, like you said, really hard in order to get this whole cohesive um, atmosphere for your career and what you do. So
And I'm still working hard.
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, you are. You are. We woke up early for this, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, this was great, David. I'm gonna wrap up the episode. So please share with us your thoughts. How do you define who you are as an individual? If you've struggled with your identity, how did you go about determining who you want to be? And if you're still struggling while listening to this, I hope that this episode was helpful. And if you try out any of the tools and methods that we discussed here today with David, um, we'd love to know how it turns out for you. And David, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I knew when we first met that this was going to be an enriching conversation, and we did exactly that today. So, before we go, do you have any last parting words for the audience?
For the audience, hey, don't be shy. I'm available on my Instagram, David Allen Tracy. Reach out to me. I'm very responsive. My email, david@davidallentracy.com. My website, davidallentracy.com. So it's so easy, everyone. Just know my name.
Yeah.
So reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And, I will be definitely sharing this podcast on all my platforms, email marketing, and all the things. Michelle, I'm hugely privileged, and it's such a pleasure that you had me on your podcast. So thank you so much. And you're doing great work.
Oh, thank you. Well, David's socials and his links and all that will be in the show notes. Make sure to head over there and give him a follow. He's great, as you can tell. And remember to take advantage of the first month of free access to David's Brand Masters Collective group with the code Be My Guest 2024. And of course, I'll also put that in the show notes for y'all too. Well, this was great. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And as always, I will talk to you soon. Bye.